Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do a video kind of like a sew along and it's for the Friday Pattern Company's Heather blazer. So if I first start by running through what you need for this project, you need a main fabric. I'm using a leopard print, it's a really thick kind of cotton. You also need a lining fabric. I'm using this purple, it's just a polyester basic lining for suit jackets and stuff. Not sure if it's going to go, but it's what I had in stock, so yeah, I'm just going to roll with it and hopefully it will look okay. I mean, it's mostly going to be hidden anyway unless I roll up the sleeves, so I'm not too worried. And then you need two types of interfacing. You need a woven interfacing and you also need a knit interfacing, and this has kind of got some stretch to it. And lastly, should you wish, you need a 1-inch button. I've just gone for a plain black button because I thought that would work nicely. I suppose you can leave off the button if you don't have any intention of tying it, but I think it looks nice with a button on it. So that's everything you need. Let's get started. So your first step was to get every piece cut out, all your main fabric pieces, your lining pieces and your different interfacings. The pattern pieces do actually say whether they're for the knit or the woven on them, and there's also a list in the instruction book, but this definitely took quite a while. There's a lot of pieces, so definitely be prepared to just put some headphones on, listen to some music and enjoy the process. But yeah, cut out all your pieces for your interfacing, your main fabric and your lining, and I'll see you in the next bit. So once you've cut all your pattern pieces out, the next step is to interface the ones that require interfacing. There is two types of interfacing used in this pattern. There's woven interfacing and knit interfacing, and you can find a list in the instructions to tell you which pieces require which type of interfacing. So I'm just going to go ahead and interface all these pieces. I'm going to use a damp cloth on the top and then just press my iron down, not sliding the iron, just press, lift, so as not to move or distort anything. And then yeah, we'll come back to the next step. Okay, I've ironed all my interfacing onto my main fabric. It took quite some time. Again, might want to continue with the headphones and the music. But it's all done now. It took a long time, as I say, especially when you realise that you've been doing one of the large front jacket pieces and you never actually laid the interfacing on it and you've just been pressing an empty piece of fabric for the last 10 minutes. So yeah, that was a bit of a bummer. But anyway, the next step, once you go round, you might want to trim off any bits of interfacing that are overhanging the fabric, just neaten it up a bit. I've done that. And now we need to mark any dots and stars onto our fabric, onto our pattern pieces, because they're going to be quite important. So to do that, for example, with this dot, I've just put a pin right through the middle of it, and then I just kind of pull that paper out the way, and where the pin's going through I just mark it with a pen. I use the, what are they called, Friction Pilot Friction pens. They're great because they disappear once you apply heat. So I'm going to go through all the pattern pieces and mark off any dots and stars and make sure all my notches are cut. Okay, I know that was a lot of prep and it takes some time, but it's worth doing it properly so that everything goes together nicely. So last bit of prep before we actually start sewing, we've got our two pocket pieces, and you need to locate the top where the notches are, either end on both. And you are going to start with the fabric wrong side facing you, press down the top 1/4 inch, so I'm just going to do that with my iron to both of them, 1/4 inch down. Okay, and now that we've pressed them down 1/4 inch, we're going to flip them over to the other side, and then locating those notches in the edge, we're folding down to that point, to that notch, and pressing across the top as well. So yeah, fold at the notch and press along the top of both of them. Okay, so this is what it should look like when you have finished the pressing. We're now going to sew down each side of the pocket here, just to hold that flap down, 3/8 of an inch, I believe. Okay, so we've got our two pockets stitched with a 3/8 seam just at the top there to hold down the flap. We're now going to just snip those corners as close to the stitching as you can, just to reduce the bulk a bit, and then we're going to turn the flaps out and give it a good press. Okay, so I clipped my corners and turned the points out the other way, flipped it over and given it a press across the top, and you also press down either side, the 3/8, which it naturally wants to fall into because of the seam allowance we used when we stitched there. So we're going to press the sides and the bottom also 3/8 of an inch up, and that is our pocket ready to attach onto the front of our blazer. I forgot to say at the last point on the pockets that you then have to edge stitch quite as close to the edge as you can do, really. I think they say 1/8 from the edge, just to hold that down. And then with our pockets, we're going to take our front jacket piece and we're going to use the tailor's tacks, or the marks, however you marked those two star points earlier. And that is going to tell us the placement of our pocket. So I've just placed it there for you to see, and I'm going to pin that down now and stitch it to the jacket. Okay, so I've got that all pinned, and now I'm going to just top stitch around the three sides, the two sides and the bottom, leaving obviously the top of the pocket open. Okay, so the next step is to take your two back pieces, which are easily identifiable because they're the two that have the little bit of interfacing on the back yoke, and put them together, right sides together, and we're going to sew along the centre back seam with a 3/8 seam allowance. I am now going to press that seam open with the iron. I also forgot to mention, I actually overlocked my centre back seams before sewing them. It didn't say to do that in the pattern, and I know it's going to be lined, but I just always panic with things fraying and, you know, seams bursting. So I'm spending so much time, energy, effort, money on this jacket. I just want to be sure everything's completely secure. So I did overlock them before I stitched them so that I can press them open here. I'm going to do that now. Okay, now it's going to be time to join the two front pieces to the back piece, and we're going to join them at the shoulder and the side seam. I'm going to also overlock these seams before I stitch them, but yeah, we're just going to be with a 3/8 seam allowance. We're going to stitch 3/8 across that way, 3/8 down the sides, and we're going to do that for both pieces and then press the seams open. I'll see you when I've done all that. Okay, so once you have finished those steps and everything's been pressed, you will have a vest, basically. The next step is to take your two sleeve pieces, and firstly, taking the upper sleeve piece, you're going to do 2 rows of gathering stitches between the notches on the top of the sleeve. You do the first one 1/4 of an inch in, and then the second one 1/4 of an inch within that, so you're not going further than 1/2 inch over the edge of the sleeve. So you do 2 rows of gathered stitches, and then we're going to attach the lower sleeve to the upper sleeve along both sides and press it. So I will do all that and be back with you. Okay, just to recap, I have done my 2 rows of gathering stitches on both the upper sleeve parts, and now I'm going to attach the lower sleeve to both sides of it. So I'll start with one, and then I'll pin it to the other side and stitch along here as well onto there, and then I will press all the seams and show you what it looks like once both the sleeves have been made. Okay, so when you've finished stitching both seams of the sleeve, this is what you will have. The next step is to now join the sleeves to our vest and make it actually become a blazer. So if you turn your sleeve out the right way, so that we've got right sides together, and just slip it into the jacket, you're then going to pin the sleeve to the armhole all the way around, using those gathered stitches we made at the top just to kind of ease it in. It's very important, as they say in the pattern, that this is not meant to be gathered. You're not meant to have any puckers on the right side. It's literally just a little bit of ease just to make it perfectly fit the hole. So be really gentle on those gather stitches. Don't pull it super tight, it's not necessary. But yeah, we're just going to stitch all the way around the armhole and join the sleeve to the jacket. Okay, so I have put both my sleeves in, and now it's time to attach the collar. So on the main fabric you attach the under collar pieces. So you pin them right sides together on the neck of the jacket, and it's really important that those dots we marked earlier, that they meet on both sides. So I've just put a pin through this, and that is where you are going to start stitching, right on that dot, and then stitch all the way along to the other end dot and finish there. So I'm now going to attach the collar. I should have said as well, with the two under collar pieces, you join them together in the middle. So I've done that there, and then yeah, pinned it onto the neckline of my jacket, and I'm going to attach that now. Okay, so I have attached the collar, the under collar, to the back of the jacket, and I've pressed that seam open, and it also said to snip one notch an inch away from the dots, which I'm sure you'll be able to follow from the pattern. There's a good illustration to show you what they mean. It just helps that seam lay flat. And now it's time to start assembling the lining. So I have one of the front side lining pieces here, and the piece that we're going to attach it to, so we're going to pin all the way along and stitch that now. So we're going to start assembling the lining. It's also worth noting that you're not going to sew all the way to the very bottom. There's a notch just under an inch before the bottom, and that's where you're going to stop. So don't go off the end when you're stitching. Sorry about the lighting, it's night time now. Okay, so it's a new day and I've raced ahead just a tiny bit. So I have stitched the seam there, the lining to the face in there, and I've pressed the seams open on both of those. I've done both sides, and then the next step was to take your two back lining pieces and stitch them at the center seam, but you're not going to stitch all the way down. So there's notches this end, and there's a notch at the bottom as well, and you only stitch from the notch to the edge and from the notch to the edge. You're leaving a big hole in the middle, and that is how you're going to turn your entire blazer out the right way once you've joined the lining to the jacket. So yeah, it's just important that you leave a hole in the middle, but I've stitched that and pressed it. And the next step now is to continue constructing the lining. So we're going to attach the lining backs to the lining fronts at the at the shoulder seam and the side seam, and then we're going to also insert the lining sleeves the same way we did the blazer. So it literally says in the instructions to follow the steps you did to construct the rest of the jacket so far. You're going to do the same thing with all the lining pieces. So we're going to join the front to the back now, as I say, across that shoulder and across the side seams, and then we are going to insert the sleeves as well. So we'll basically have a second jacket made out of the lining. So I'm going to get straight on with doing that now. Okay, so I have completely constructed the lining now. I've got the sleeves on, the back and the front sewn together, so it's literally like another mini jacket. The next step is to attach the upper collar to the neckline in exactly the same way that we attached it last time to the jacket. We're going to follow the same steps, lining up those dots that we marked off earlier. Okay, I have pinned the collar to the lining, and now I'm ready to stitch, remembering to start exactly on the point back stitch and end exactly on the point as well, so we have a nice sharp collar. I'm going to stitch that now. Okay, so once you have sewn your collar to your lining, it is time to join the jacket to the lining, and you do that firstly by attaching them at the collar. So I have pinned my collar lining, my collar on the lining side to the collar on the main fabric side, right sides together, and it's really important that you pin through the dots on both. You're going to start directly in that dot, sew around with a 3/8 seam allowance all the way, and end at the other dot, and you want to make sure your seam allowance is out of the way. But I'm going to sew the collars together now. Okay, so I have stitched my collar from that dot around, and we're now going to stitch from the lapel all the way down the front of the coat to the hem. Again, you flip that seam allowance out the way. Make sure you start right through the dots, and you're going to stitch up to there and all the way down to the bottom. Just to say, make sure you repeat that on the other side, on the other lapel, and then we are going to clip all the corners of the collar. We'll clip there and we'll clip across there after, just to reduce bulk anywhere we can before moving on to the next step. So yeah, sew down the front sides, the front seams on both sides, clip the corners, and I will see you at the next step. Okay, so after you've sewn down the side front on your lapels, you then need to grade your seam allowance. That means on the side that has your main fabric, you're going to cut all the seam allowance down to 1/4 of an inch, so that it's smaller on this side, and you go all the way down the side to the point where there was a notch which signifies your lapel break. But yeah, grade all your seams around your collar and down the lapels that we just stitched. And now we are going to hem our cuffs, our sleeve cuffs. So we start with taking it over excuse me, start with taking it over to the ironing board, and I will tell you what we need to do. Okay, so with your main sleeve pieces, we are going to turn it up by 1 inch and 3/8 and give that a good press. So I've marked on my ruler 1 inch and 3/8, and I'm going to use that as a guide to press the sleeve down. Okay, I have pressed the sleeves up by 1 inch and 3/8, and the next bit gets a little bit confusing. Okay, I'm hoping that you can see. So this is one side of the jacket, so that's where we sewed the lapel down and we've graded our seams. So you've got your main fabric sleeve and your lining sleeve, and you're going to slip the lining sleeve over the main sleeve so that these two raw edges are together, and we're going to sew around there. Okay, so I have pinned it in place, and now we want to sew around this 3/8 of an inch, and it's going to mean that inside you just have that little bit of main fabric, and then your sleeve lining starts. It's going to look really beautiful. So yeah, we're just going to stitch all the way around this sleeve now, stitching the line into the main fabric. Okay, so I have sewn the sleeves together at that bit that we folded over, and then I took a sewing needle and I just hand tacked, as per the instructions, a couple of holding stitches so that the seam, just through the seam allowance, it doesn't go through to the main, you're not going to see it, it's just to hold this bit onto this seam allowance, just so that when it's turned out the right way, that the sleeve doesn't ever sag and droop. So that was that, and now the next step is really just starting to do the finishing off. So we are going to finish the bottom hem where we left that kind of 1 inch gap where the lining meets the main fabric. We're going to go to there and check out how we finish off the bottom hem. Okay, so we're working off this bit where the lining meets the main fabric, and we left that kind of 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch gap there. At this point it gets pretty tricky, and Friday Pattern Company have an amazing video on YouTube. It's called Sewing the Heather Blazer Corner Hem, and I highly suggest you use that for this step because it's just going to be just as difficult for me to explain it, and they do such a wonderful job at showing it. So I'd say go over to that video, and then if you want to see what mine looks like once I've finished all that finishing, then stick around. Okay, and I'm all done. Here is my completed blazer. I'm so happy with it. I'm sorry about these videos and the constant lump in my throat that's made me sound a bit hoarse. Just getting over a really strong, horrible cold. It knocked me for six a bit. But yeah, I'm so pleased to have it done. I can't wait to wear it. I know it's a bit loud and garish, but I'm hoping with a all black ensemble underneath that hopefully it will look lovely. I'm thinking black vest, black jeans, black shoes, and this as the statement. So yeah, I'm just going to show you some of the close-ups.